Hey guys, welcome back to Game Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're talking about Marathon, and we're going over the numbers because I really do believe that Marathon could be the linchpin, not just for PlayStation or Bungie, but even for Sony itself as an entire company. And again, I don't really care what you or my opinion is on Marathon. This is more about how Marathon can affect Sony and PlayStation as a company. And it's going to definitely affect Bungie. Bungie, I think, but we're going to get into that a little bit more. So we're going to break all of that down, and I'm going to do this as quickly as I can, but stay with me as there is a lot of data to go through. So what we know with Bungie is that they were running in the red, so they've already had layoffs. We're going to go through this as quickly as we can, but they've nearly had nearly a 50% reduction in force, which I don't entirely agree with that, but we'll go over as to why. Here's the three big layoff sections that they had, basically adding up to 475 people out of 1,600, which was their peak around 2023. And where they're coming up with approximately 850 employees, I have no idea. But we're probably looking about maybe around 1,000, 1,100 employees, somewhere in there. And it all kind of started when there was a little bit of a shock. So we know that they bought them for $3.6 billion for the prior year, and Xbox had said no. And then we were taking a look at Lightfall expansion. Well, that didn't overly go very well, and it was quite the miss because, again, it was not what people were expecting. And what we found out, too, this is not in this article, but Lightfall actually sold more than the Final Shape did. And this had something to do with knowing that the Final Shape was going to be the end of the story for Destiny 2, and that Marathon was being made, and that was basically going to take over, which is where we are today. So yeah, that just didn't overly go very well. A lot of people are very frustrated. We also had the Final Shape. There was Destiny 2 has had multiple delays as well, and then Marathon has also been delayed. So really, they needed to just save some money. They had mismanagement. We also know too that roughly a total of 375 members of the company were also, laid off, or some of them too were reallocated. We know that some were put into SIE. We also know that Bungie is no longer independent to really make decisions on its own. It's really just now focused under Sony, under a watchful eye, and yeah, they're keeping a very sharp eye. That's why Marathon 2 is so important to the company. And then, too, the whole plagiarism thing and delaying the game into March, that didn't help anything either, with the art director basically being fired or let go. He resigned. So yeah, this has been a major problem. When we take a look at Bungie itself as a company today, we're looking at roughly, as of January 31st, 2026, 1,200 employees. I still think that's maybe a little high, but we can all kind of finagle around the numbers a little bit. But I really want to get to what it's ultimately going to cost. So Marathon. So they've been working on the game since 2019, maybe 2020. And then Destiny 2 also now has a skeleton crew, and most have been working on Marathon since 2023. And that's been full production since May of 2023. We also had the plagiarism delay, which delayed it from September 25 to March of 2026. That was basically 5 months and more money. And between Ashes of Creation, Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I even put Cyberpunk in here, we kind of have an idea that there's roughly millions per month that is spent in full production for any game that's in the 2020s with a fairly big studio. So we know Ashes of Creation is roughly about $120 million that's been wasted. They had about 250 devs at roughly $2.5 million per month. Assassin's Creed Shadows also had the main studio plus 15 other studios for a total of 16 supporting the game. An additional cost with the delay that they had of 4 months, it was another roughly $20 million at roughly $5 million a month, which is crazy because that is so many studios working on a game, and that is so much money being spent just for the delay itself, to give you an idea what full production crunch time really looks like in cost. Cyberpunk 2077 also needed about 3.5 years to fix, at roughly, according to the company themselves, $125 million, which roughly equated to about $3 million a month, and they roughly have 700 devs. So how did Marathon? What about the cost of Marathon? Well, we're probably looking at roughly with how many devs are working on it, 250 million or more. We know that there's a skeleton crew again working on Destiny 2 in full production of Marathon, with Bungie having roughly 1,000 or 1,200 employees. This means that roughly 800 or 900 devs are working on Marathon in one of the most expensive places in the world, which is Washington State, USA. And that's how some of these games are able to be cheaper, like Arc Raiders or like Hunt Showdown, is because they're made somewhere else. They have smaller studios or less devs. So how many copies do they ultimately have to sell? Well, between Steam and Xbox, there will roughly be a 30% fee for selling on their store. And if we take a look at the Marathon game, we're looking at a standard being $40 and a deluxe being $50. We'll just take an average, or $60. We'll take an average of $50. PlayStation 2 won't have a fee since it's their game. Why would they charge money for their own game? It wouldn't make any sense. So when we take a look at the majority of players, they'll be buying generally from Steam and a little bit from Xbox. But we'll take a look at Helldiver 2 numbers, and we'll also take a look at Arc Raiders as well. So this is Helldiver numbers. This is roughly 20 million, and this is the breakdown. And as you can see, I mean, it's roughly 65 and 70% are actually buying it off of Steam compared to the PlayStation and the Xbox breakdown. When we take a look at Arc Raiders, it's roughly the same story. So we have 53.5%. And this is due kind of the difference, I guess, just a side note between launching all at once versus launching on staggered platforms. Kind of a big difference there. But anyway, Arc Raiders is roughly 53%, with PlayStation at 25 and Xbox at 21. But regardless of whether we're looking at, PlayStation is roughly around 25-30% every single time. So that's some of the numbers that we're going to be using here. So if we're taking the cost of the game at $50 and we're basically charging a 30% fee, well, that leaves $35 left from game sales to basically break even. This also doesn't account for like other marketing or licensing stuff, or if there's physical copies or whatever. That takes a chunk out of it too, but we're just trying to keep it simple. So roughly, if it's $200 million at $35 per copy, they would need to sell 5.7 million copies. And then when we account for not charging on PlayStation sales, we'd need a total of 4 million copies to sell just to break even. When we're looking at $250 million, we would roughly need 4.97 million copies to be sold just to break even on Marathon. And that's really kind of insane because that's a really good chunk of money. Now, Arc Raiders has roughly had 14 million in sales, and so I think Marathon could hit that, but they're definitely going to be hurt some with Arc Raiders being first, with the plagiarism delay that Marathon had to have. And yeah, this isn't profit yet. There's still going to be cost after launch, so they still need to sell more, either in units or in microtransactions. So we know that there's going to be continued post-launch support and content, and then there's also server cost, which of course adds money every single month. And this is why, even though Concord was already made and put out there, the player counts were low, that probably not even the server costs were really even being covered. Now, of course, I don't think that's going to happen to Marathon. So when we're taking a look at Sony buying Bungie, okay, they bought them for basically $3.6, $3.7 billion, depending on who you listen to, and this was January of 2022. They basically bought them for Destiny 2, primarily for Marathon. Also, they break off of Team LFG to continue to work on Project Gummy Bears, which is another multiplayer live service game of some sort. That's all we know so far. And then also Bungie's expertise on building live service games. Also, they've had the continued cost of dev and servers for these games. And so I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that by now, in 2026, they've probably spent about $4 billion on Bungie. So if Destiny 2 is dying off, again, player counts are not very good. Most of us know that. They've also just delayed Shadow and Order now to June, which was literally supposed to launch right around kind of Marathon. But yeah, that's going to be, and we found out too that Shadow and Order is going to be renamed and can be completely retooled and pretty much redone. So I think what's going to happen is that Marathon's going to come out. They're getting ready. They're going to maybe fix some stuff when Marathon is released. maybe within the first couple of weeks, and then a lot of devs are going to go back to Destiny and start working on the next expansion for that game to get it ready for June. And this is going to become a problem of going back and forth between Marathon and Destiny while trying to support two live service games. Even with 1,000 devs, this is going to start to become a problem depending on how big the game is or how much pressure they get from Sony to perform. Also, too, Marathon is, I wouldn't say underperforming, but if they did underperform, that would definitely be an issue. Also, Marathon is very dividing right now. Either people like it or love it, or people absolutely hate the game, and there's no middle. I said in my review that I thought the game was mid. I thought it was fine. I mean, it is what it is. It's an extraction shooter. I don't think there's anything overly amazing there compared to other extraction shooters out there that hasn't already been done before. But we'll see what they do. There's supposed to be some raids and some other stuff, but yeah, we'll see. Also, Project Gummy Bears, there's really not a lot of excitement for that. So if all of this kind of doesn't perform like it's already not, and we'll see what the launch numbers are for Marathon, what ultimately happens for Bungie? And we are going to go over the actual numbers for Marathon when I get through the. But yeah, are we looking at roughly a $4 billion loss? Well, how would this ultimately affect PlayStation? I mean, PlayStation sales are already kind of low for quite a few games, and also console sales are also slowing. And then also, how would this also affect Sony? PlayStation is roughly 35% of the company's business. So if PlayStation falters, Sony does too. And Sony's already removed 4 different positions of leadership just in the 2020s, and that may continue if there's continued problems. They've already removed the head of music, the head of movies, and also Jim Ryan, the head of PlayStation, now with Nishino, and Holst is still in charge over the studios, which I still think is a mistake. That's just my personal opinion. And then they also replaced the president of Sony with the CFO. And so, does PlayStation really see growth? Well, I would say it's little or kind of steady. They generally see over time increased counts on PSN or those that are switching over to PlayStation Plus to some degree or in some way. They hit like 50 million, I think, on PlayStation Plus, and roughly they're about 123 million on PSN. They're also still seeing sales on kind of titles. Ghost of Yotei sold 3.3 million copies, I think, just for PlayStation. I think eventually it will go over to Steam. And yeah, they've gotten some sales on certainly some other games too. But there's also other games. There's also Fair Games, which again doesn't seem like that's going to go over very well. People are not excited for that. We also had Horizon Steel Frontiers, which is a mobile game only. Mobile is the fastest expanding platform for gamers, and they can pull in a ton of money. Like Monopoly Go pulled in over $10 billion by now, which is insane. So it is a possibility, but we'll have to see how that performs. We also had Horizon Hunters Gathering, which again is PlayStation 5 and Steam, but again, not a lot of people really enjoyed that. They're not overly excited. That's not the type that they want. I think they would maybe rather have Horizon 3 than some kind of offshoot like this. We also have Soros launching later this year. I think that will actually perform pretty well because people are excited for it. And I don't think it costs a ton of money to actually make that game. There's also Marvel Wolverine, and I think people are also very excited for that. And so far, both of those, as far as I know, are just on PlayStation. There's also Intergalactic in 2027, and yeah, that might actually perform well too. We'll have to see what the gameplay is like. But yeah, too, PlayStation has already had quite a few losses with live service games that have been canceled. Let's go ahead and go through that list. So far we've had The Last of Us, we've also had Spider-Man Great Web, we've also had a London studio live service game, Twisted Metal, Helldivers 2 was released, and has actually performed way better than expectations, which is probably a good thing. There's also the Payback project from Bungie, which that was canceled. We also had Concord, which was 12 days until that was shut down, and $400 million, which is just, I still can't get over that. That is so crazy to me. There's also a live service game at Bend Studios that was canceled. A live service God of War game. Fair Games is not likely to do well. We'll see how Marathon does. And then there's also the Horizon Online game, which we found out there's roughly 2. Again, the mobile game and then Hunter's Gathering. So, not a very good list. Again, all of these have cost money to make, to brand, to get studios to work on. Some of these studios, too, don't really exist anymore. They've also had layoffs. And like Bluepoint, they're gone. I think that's incredibly frustrating. So this is really not great. We've also had Sony make changes in the movie business or in their TV business. They're now partnering with TCL, which is a Chinese company, to ultimately make production of their TVs cheaper to make. And they're doing that because I think they need to. They're not really selling enough. It's getting too expensive with all of the supply tariff issues and the cost of RAM and everything. Because, yeah, TVs have RAM in it now, too, which is insane. I like my dumb stuff, but that's just me. But yeah, everything basically has RAM in it now that has a screen. So I really think Marathon could be the linchpin for Sony. And I still ultimately believe that consoles can't compete in the current market that we have. And I think a lot of younger folks are seeing what console is versus what Steam is and PC gaming. And yeah, they're just wanting to go over to PC gaming because it's ultimately cheaper. They don't have to pay for multiplayer. There's more choice and liberty with their decision making over there. And there's multiple storefronts, and that also helps to keep the cost cheaper too. There's also way more games available to them than ever before. And I have several friends that have been on Xbox and well, I've had one I think on Xbox and then several on PlayStation 5, and they've ultimately just moved over to PC and they're not looking back. I mean, they are more happy and excited than ever before. And I don't think it's just Xbox or PlayStation. I think it's ultimately also Nintendo too that is having this issue with consoles, is that the walled gardens are ultimately coming down, that PC and mobile are still growing as platforms, and there's more engagement over there while just all consoles are just kind of stagnating and underperforming than what's expected. And so this could explain the changes for each company with what they've had, with the stagnation, with some of the decisions that they've made that haven't made players happy, and maybe they feel they need to, of course. I think especially Xbox. But, we used to have 12 consoles. Now we have 3. We could go down to 2, though Asha Sharma of Xbox has said, yes, we are still doing a console. But ultimately, someday we could just have 1. And I think that's really interesting. And not to say that any of these companies are going away, but they could go the way of Sega, where they just become more or less a publisher, or they partner with other third parties to make the hardware, like what Sony is doing with their TVs to ultimately make the production cheaper. So, but either way, things have to change, and we have to get to a point where things are becoming more affordable for the company. That's why we're having the layoffs and the studio closures across the board. I also don't believe that Sony's going to stop porting PC, Switch 2, or Xbox games. They've made roughly $3 billion in 5 years, and I don't think they're going to stop doing that. Especially if the rest of their live service games are not doing very well or kind of on the downward trend. They're going to need as much money as they can get. When we also take a look at the PlayStation thing here, this is Sony as a company, but like their last earnings report for the holidays was not good. They had a net income of negative $6.55 billion. That's actually enough to wipe out the last 12 months of income, of net income, which is crazy. Which means they literally made no profit over the last year, which I think is insane. Though it says here that for this particular quarter, they still had net margin of 10%. I'm not really sure how they did that, but that's not great. Also, we're finding too that their payout ratio for their dividend is not good. We also found out, too, that their earnings per share is also now negative, which is not good. And then this is after the launch of Marathon. And this is not good either. So Monday, it was down 1.6% on the Sony stock. And then after Marathon, that is atrocious, dude. 9.3% down just in pre-market. Look at this sell-off. So yeah, the investors, people that are trying to make money off of Sony, they're not excited about the performance of Marathon. That's crazy. And just to add these numbers together, we're looking at so far negative 11%. The other thing, too, that PlayStation has to worry about is that we ultimately have Vanguard coming. Eve Vanguard, this is another extraction shooter, and this is coming Q3, probably August or September of 2026. So Marathon is going to launch in March, and this is coming in August, which, let's see, April, May, June, July, August. So they have 5 months until this other game comes out and releases. I think it's going to be a full release. There's not anything that I can see about like early access or anything like that. I do believe this is a full release. And then, yeah, this too is delayed and expected to eventually come to console, maybe next year in 2027. So this is not just about Arc Raiders. There's someone else getting into the space and going to compete for some of that cash. And the more competition there is, usually the worse that is for everybody else that has already existed, including Arc Raiders. We kind of had the server slam in here, right, that we were kind of expecting. And yeah, there was a little bit of a dip down in there, but again, the player counts peaked, definitely went down some during the server slam, and then while it was still happening, we worked on going back up again. And especially now that it's over, we're back at, kind of like normal levels from what we were. So it did pull, I don't know, several tens of thousands to go try Marathon. I think there's definitely some interest there. But yeah, that's kind of a problem. We also know too that some people are posting that there's already cheats in Marathon during the server slam, and that's going to cause some issues too. So I hopefully they do permabans on those accounts. They would have to, I think, buy another copy of Marathon for $40. I don't know how much they're really going to do that, but there's also ways to get keys for cheaper than that. Me, if I was running a company, I would just permaban your hardware. That would just be the end of that. You can just go play something else. That's how I would do it. And if you don't like it, don't play my game. But yeah, cheaters too can also continue to cause a problem, as they have already with Destiny 2, and this would definitely, I think, hurt Marathon Works, as it's really only a PvP type of extraction shooter. So that's kind of the numbers right now, and this is how Marathon can kind of just be super damaging for a PlayStation. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, and I don't want companies to have to fail. Okay, but I definitely think the gaming industry is overbloated. That costs are way too high, and that stuff does have to change because we can't keep trend chasing all the time. There's not enough diversity. It's all chasing pretty much live service and microtransactions, regardless of where you look. And that's not just a PlayStation issue or problem. That's in my opinion, it's pretty much everybody. Oh yeah, there was something I wanted to share too. When we go to PlayStation Time Tracker, this is roughly 13,000 volunteers that have played this week. And we take a look at where Marathon Server Slam is. It's number 20. So roughly 755 people played out of 13,000. They accrued about 1,800 hours. They roughly played for about an hour each on average. That's what they played. So it did get some attention. People were excited about this, and this should accrue all of the server slam time. It should be updated as of today, Tuesday. When we take a look at the server slam, again, there was a lot of interest, 143,000, and then within that first few hours, people trailed off pretty heavily, just realizing it's probably not for them. But some people did come back. We had 84,000. 76,000, 64,000, and then at the end of the day, peak was 25,000. So a lot of people didn't play that last day, which if people really like it, I think they would have continued playing as long as they could. And then, yeah, when it was over, it trailed off, right? It was basically done. So definitely some interest. I think people are definitely interested in. So taking a look at the wish list chart, I think Marathon is in the top 10. Oh, no, not quite. Oh, wow. I really think it was actually in the top 10, but maybe a lot of people got rid of their pre-order. Oh, there's Marathon. Number 32. So when taking a look at Xbox Most Played, taking a look a couple days ago, I saw that the Marathon Server Slam was roughly number 191. And now as of early Tuesday morning, this is usually like a day or a few days lagged behind. But yeah, this is just Xbox and 469 games. And this is the top 250, and it's not on here. which is surprising. Like, it shouldn't be gone yet because, as far as I understand, the system is lagged. PlayStation Time Tracker is a little bit more up to date, and of course, so is Steam. Steam is like real time. But as far as I understand, most played is lagged a little bit, like 2 or 3 days. But yeah, it's not even on here. So that means that people basically played the first day or second day and then just didn't play after that. And I'm going through it again. Yeah, that's the top 250. Went through it again and I just didn't even see it. We can take a look at PlayStation pre-orders. So right now, PlayStation pre-orders, this is the top 24 games. And we see that Marathon is number 3 for the deluxe edition, and then number 7 for the standard edition. Man, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because I don't want Sony to continue to have more layoffs. I don't want anyone to continue to have layoffs. It's horrible when that happens. I don't want to have any more studio closures, but if that's what it takes to get away from this live service push that people, I think, are overly done with, I think people are somewhat done with live service unless there's something new to engage with. So we'll have to see. And I think there's more of a call for PvE than PvP right now because I don't think anything else really makes sense. I think Marathon could have been really good. And if you want to watch that video, I'll leave it down at the end screen. But yeah, I think Marathon is missing something, and I think they could have gone that route, but I think it's too late to change it now. Is Bungie going to have the time to make Destiny 3 or some other game after Marathon? I don't think so. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm personally not interested in Marathon. I'm not interested in Arc Raiders. I'm just wanting to present the data because I think it's interesting. So I love this type of stuff. We're also going to dig through Mike Bell's yearly report on gaming. It's 231 pages, but yeah, we're going to pretty much go through the whole thing. That's going to be long. I will probably have a necked down version, heavily edited, that I'll post. But I'll probably post both for those that are interested when I can get that out. But this is going to be the last vid I'm probably going to really make on Marathon. I'll make some posts on my YouTube channel at Gaming Garbage 22. Just kind of how the launch is going and what the reviews are like and stuff after it's been a little bit. We'll have to see what happens. So with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys on the next one.